We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself.
Just because you go into knowingness doesn't mean you will suddenly know everything there is to know about a particular thing.
And since you're all here and engaged in this sort of inquiry and listening to this sort of lecture, I assume that you're all on the process of waking up.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. I just came across this video which honestly pissed me off, and I just had to talk about it. This is a video which comes from Father Mosiv, another YouTube channel, clearly a priest, and he's talking about the basics of demonology and how to tell if you're demon possessed. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because he gives a lot of advice which is actually very dangerous, it's irresponsible, and this advice will actually lead to causing people to have, quote, demons and not actually have a healthy psychological profile. So before further ado, let's just get into it.
So these four categories highlight what we would say are the basics of demonology, the four categories that you will find people falling into. So when we begin, we have a category that you may be asking yourself, how is everyone in it? Well, this category is thoughts. What do we mean by this? Thoughts are, as the Holy Fathers write in Greek, logos me. Not pronounced logos moi, even though that's how it looks. Logos me. This is the intrusive thoughts that happen to everyone on a daily basis. Sometimes, if we're very scatterbrained or uncontrolled, it can happen from the moment that we awake to the moment that we go to bed. Our mind is constantly going. Now, some of our thoughts are our own, but some of the thoughts are not. It's very much like those old-time cartoons with the angel and the demon on the shoulders.
Just gonna pause there. Okay, so I'll acknowledge that he's partly correct, but he's massively misinterpreting things. Not all thoughts originate in the ego. That much is true. However, the other thoughts, they don't come from literal demons that are lurking around out there. They're coming from your own unconscious, your contained, repressed instincts, your own complexes, your own archetypes. Now, it's something that the church does is to name this demonic like it's some external projection. This is a very old way of thinking, and I came well before we actually started studying the human mind and understanding how things actually work. What he's describing is psychic autonomy before psychology existed. When we come across things like when we say, I don't know why I thought that, we are encountering that autonomous complex. Our task is not to exercise it, but to integrate it. And that's how we can actually get healthy. So let's carry on with this nonsense.
The demons have been at this since the beginning of time. They know our temperament, our personality, our proclivities, and of course, they know our inclinations. They know the things that we veer towards. So, someone who is very proud, they're going to continually give them thoughts that feed their ego, that make them feel puffed up, that tells them that they're better than other people. They'll look down on others. But somebody who's inclined to despair, the demons are very much going to feed them thoughts about how they're worthless. They're less than everybody.
Okay, so what he's viewing as external tempters, they're our own shadow contents. They're the rejected aspects of the self that seek to express themselves. The devil could be seen as the rejected half of God, just as the demon is the rejected half of man. When we cast them out, it creates superstition instead of transformation, and we're missing out on that whenever we buy into this whole story. When you look at battling demons, it should mean coming to terms with what we've denied within ourselves. When we have that sort of confrontation, it does real moral development for us. Anyway, keeping going.
The devil wants to cause us to fall off one or the other side of the road. He's always pushing for extremes. And he's whispering and inclining our minds to this. And since most of us, myself included, are raised in a culture where we're very undiscerning about our thoughts, we don't pay attention to them. We often give them credence because we think that they come from ourselves, when in fact, not all thoughts are our own. In fact, one of the key points that the fathers draw in their distinction is there are times when you're using your mind, like you have a math equation that you need to solve, or you have a balance sheet that you need to resolve. That's when you're using your mind. But then sometimes your mind is using you. And that's what we've talked about in past videos, when you're in the thought-nado, when you're spinning around, chasing intrusive thought after intrusive thought after intrusive thought, having conversations in your mind with people who don't exist for all intents and purposes because they're not there, when you're having arguments, when you're having bitterness or resentment or anger, whenever you're feeding what they call the passions or the sins, you are feeding into what the devil is trying to feed us. It's very much like being in the matrix of our own mind, where we have yet to differentiate truth from falsehood, truth from illusion.
Okay, that's a bit to break down there. Okay, so the illusion arises not from demons, but from identification with the ego. When consciousness mistakes itself for the whole of the psyche, it falls into fantasy and confusion. So it's like the inflation of consciousness. It's not a cosmic enemy that traps us. If we want real freedom, it has to come through psychological differentiation, learning how to see parts of us that are speaking without fear and moral panic. Okay, so let's continue on here.
This is very key that we understand. Everyone suffers from this to some degree or another if they have not learned to battle and be discerning with the thoughts that they accept.
Okay, just pausing. See, this is exactly the kind of thinking that creates neurosis. When you have fear of thoughts, it strengthens the very forces that we are fearing. There's this war against our thoughts, and it breeds obsession. The church fathers call this nepsis, which is watchfulness. Without self-knowledge, it becomes pathological self-surveillance. If we observe our thoughts without judgment, then consciousness grows. And you do it through observing yourself, not by policing yourself. Moving on.
But the Holy Fathers also tell us that just because we have a thought, it's not a sin. It's just a thought. If a lustful thought comes to our mind while we're driving and we banish that thought with the sign of the cross, maybe the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, and we turn our mind away from it, it is not a sin. It's just a thought. It's just a suggestion. But they tell us if we begin to entertain that thought, or we begin to think about how we could make that thought happen, or how we could bring a resolution to that inclination, now we're getting into demonic energy. Demonic energy is what kind of starts to surround us when we feed into these negative thoughts, when we begin to entice them, the anger, the bitterness, the resentment. It can also be when somebody says, oh, I'm trusting my gut or my feelings, or I have a sensation. Sometimes people even use the language of saying, I really feel that God, XYZ. They think that they have some kind of inner emotional or some stirring that somehow reveals the secret mind of Almighty God to them. That is demonic energy.
Okay. For God's sake. Okay. The feeling function is one of the 4 pillars of consciousness. So if you're setting it up as an enemy, you're setting yourself up as an enemy. If you distrust it entirely, you cripple your own soul. You see how dangerous this message is that this man's sharing. Emotion can mislead, but it can also be a bridge to your own empathy, to your own meaning, to connection with yourself. Discernment is not suppression. It's the art of dialogue between your heart and your mind. And I talked about that video yesterday. So have a look at that, and you'll see what happens when you disconnect those two things. Anyway, to the next bit.
St. Paul is very clear to test the spirits. So many people I have encountered have had intense disappointments in their life, but they'll say, I really felt God wanted me to do that. This is extremely dangerous, this mind and this way of thinking, because we don't know what God's secret will is because it's his secret will. Or, for instance, we may have somebody who has kind of almost a foresense of things that are going to happen. And they think, oh, this is a gift. I know things, but it's not reality. It's actually demonic energy as they've entertained those thoughts or those feelings or those sensations over the years. One last one that is often a pitfall for people that they don't realize, the Holy Father spoke about this in the early church, which was trusting in dreams and analyzing dreams. The Holy Fathers are very clear. When we go to sleep, our body is asleep, but our nous, or our mind, has some consciousness or awakeness. And the demons will try to implant thoughts or dreams or ideas into us when we're asleep.
The demons! Oh no, the demons are going to get you. Okay, so dreams are the speech of the unconscious. I'd look into Carl Jung and what he says about dreams because it's absolutely fascinating. It really will break your brain when you understand it. When you look at the oldest and the most honest parts of the soul, that's what is being spoken in your dreams. To forbid dream analysis is to sever contact, at least to some degree, with your whole self, with the divine center that speaks in symbols and images. If you approach your dreams with reverence, if you get rid of the fear, even of your nightmares, they reveal the hidden meaning of our suffering and they guide us towards our wholeness. Okay. But I'm going to try and endure the rest of this with you. Let's keep going.
If we entertain or try to discern those dreams or try to figure out what's going on, we begin to shape our life off of something that is not from God. Now, it may be from our subconscious, but the reality is it may even be from the demons.
Oh, it may even be from the demons. This is really dangerous theology. It's telling a person that the deepest part of their own nature, their imagination, their instinct, their interior voice is evil. Now, that's one hell of a projection, and I will be very cautious around this fella. This kind of belief creates spiritual dissociation and lifelong guilt. And that kind of guilt is going to play with us and drive us towards the church. Save me, I've got this guilt, I have to be saved. The unconscious is morally neutral. It's a source of your light and your dark. Your light and your shadow, that's part of who we are. Our task is consciousness of integration, not exorcism of some external thing. Anyway, moving along.
So, if we're really understanding the church and the Holy Fathers and how they've taught us, we don't even listen to or entertain dreams because even they can be full of demonic energy. What is the hallmark of demonic energy, though, is that we begin to drift into self-reliance. The person who says, oh, I really feel that God, ... is trusting in a sensation that they've created or imagined or think. They're not actually living by faith. Living by faith is saying, I am going to make this decision because it falls within the moral parameters that God has revealed, and I'll trust that God will help me through any adversity that comes my way. That is actually living by faith, rather than somehow kind of putting everything on God or a feeling or whatever else. If people do this, and there are some that follow this line, you can end up in the next category, which is possession. This is when demons actually enter into you. Now, what's interesting about the way that I've drawn this is that everything is overlapping because you don't move like in a linear fashion. You kind of drift from one to the other. And it's so subtle that sometimes people will find themselves in this place. But this is few. This is not everyone. Everyone who entertains demonic energy or bad thoughts or anger or maliciousness towards somebody else is not necessarily demon possessed. What are the hallmarks or some of the hallmarks of demon possession? One of the most frequent that I see and that I hear is when people begin to do things that they don't want to do. Saint Nicodemus, or Saint Nicodemus, in his writings, he talks about the fact that when sin becomes habitual, the person begins to lose control, and they start to do things that used to be voluntary. Now it becomes involuntary.
Okay, just pausing there. What this speaker is calling possession is better understood as psychic identification. When you are overtaken by a complex, when the ego loses autonomy to rage, addictions, compulsions, that kind of thing, it seems like we are possessed, but it's being possessed by our own unconscious forces. So if you want to heal that, you have to become aware of it. You have to integrate the complex. You don't turn to religion to expose it and make it even more external, make it even more suppressed, even more denied. You're going to darken it. You're going to make it more potent. And it's going to lash out even more. Moving on.
Let me give you an example. I knew a man one time who was trying to get sober, and he said, I would tell myself every day I would get sober, and he says I would almost be in a blackout sober, where I would kind of come to myself and I would be in the liquor store buying liquor. And he said inevitably I would keep buying it, even though I had told myself I wouldn't do that. I have talked with people who have borderline personality disorder, who talk about going into a rage where it's a blackout, and they forget everyone that they love and everyone that they have a relationship with, even to the point of becoming violent.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of confusing psychiatry with theology. When you get ideas like that, it's a stigma. It stigmatizes the sick and delays real treatment for them. Psychological suffering is not evidence of evil. It's a cry from their soul for integration. So instead of looking to exercise them, what we need is compassion, proper psychoanalysis, understanding the trauma, deep healing. I can't state enough how important that is. What he's saying is so bad. So bad.
And then afterwards, they said that they kind of come back to themselves. These are the hallmarks of possession. This is somebody has given the demons free access to their soul, and the demons have begun to activate and act in such a way inside of them that is against their best interests, even to the point where they forget how they're doing things, or even why they're doing things, or even remembering how they got there. This is very serious. This is something everyone struggles with. It is treated with prayer and mindfulness and going to confession. This is something that we need to repent for, because we're always going to be struggling against our thoughts. But when we come to here, this is really where we need the intervention of the church and the priest. People who are possessed will often come into the church and have very intensive thoughts, racing anxiety, fear. They can't turn their mind off. They think that people are judging them. They think that people...
Go see a psychologist. Don't go see these guys.
They're interpreting body language. Everything about their mindset becomes warped. If they come in contact, and this is something that many priests can testify to, with relics, which are the bones of the saints, they immediately repulse. They don't want to touch them. They don't want to get near them. People will throw themselves on the ground. When the priest reads the prayers of exorcism over people, when they become a catechumen and when they get baptized, they will experience things like nausea, sickness, even to the point of vomiting, revulsion, because demonic influence is not just on the level of the psychological, it's actually a physical and spiritual matter. And since the soul and the body are knit together, demonic power that is in your soul will manifest itself in illness. I cannot tell you how many people I know that were involved in the occult and tarot cards, fortune telling, all these things that had borderline like chronic illness problems that were happening with their body that were unexplainable.
Okay, just pausing there. Uh, okay, so there's some pseudo truth here. The psyche and the body are absolutely linked. Um, when you attribute illness to demons, it reinforces magical thinking. It closes the door to medicine, psychology, leaving people very helpless. Okay, yes. So we know that the psyche can influence the body. Absolutely. Um, Usually it's through a symbolic process, not supernatural parasites. Um, if you want to heal your body, you have to think relatively positive. You have to think healthy. You have to have a positive image of yourself. You can't get there if you keep shutting down the negative parts of yourself and suppressing them, hiding them from yourself. And that's just going to sit there in the gut. It's going to be manufacturing disease by just getting more and more built up, more and more dark, more and more can't validate myself, have to find a way. It's going to absolutely mess you up and you're going to get diseased. Yeah, so moving on.
The demons always torture the soul, but along with the soul, they also torture the body. Last but not least, this is the rarest, is a demoniac. We read about the demoniac in the Gospels. Demoniacs are people that don't just have a single demon or maybe even a couple demons that are plaguing their soul, but they become completely taken over by the demonic influence to the point where they can't live in society. They have to go outside of society. They historically were people that were essentially homeless. They were crazy. They were violent. They were unpredictable. They did display supernatural and superhuman strength. I've heard several stories about people who showed this type of unnatural power. This is the most serious, and it's very rare that it happens. Most people fall somewhere into here. A lot of people entertain a lot of demonic thoughts and experience demonic energy. Few people actually get to the point of possession, and very rarely you'll have somebody who ends up on the streets. I remember years ago in the Gospels where Christ says to the demon, "Tell me your name," and he says, "My name is Legion." And reading an article from someone who wanted to give their pronouns, and in that article, they said, "What are your pronouns?" And they said, "My pronouns are Legion, because there are many of us." I would be hard pressed to believe that this person had read the Gospels or was quoting the Gospels, but was actually speaking of a supernatural evil that had taken over them. So, what are the solutions? First and foremost, we must guard ourselves by being in the church, meaning the Holy Orthodox Church. Within the church, I have seen that there is the power to combat all of these and these. We must be revealing our thoughts and being corrected on those things that are bringing demonic energy into our life. We must be diligent in saying the Jesus prayer and guarding our thoughts and minds and guarding our hearts from demonic influence. And if we end up in the case of being in one of these later categories, we need to find an Orthodox priest who is equipped to help us through the exorcism process in order to restore our souls to normality. I hope that this is helpful for you, both looking at your life and potentially maybe even seeing some people around you. And in the next video, I'll talk about my youth.
And that's enough of that. So this is obviously humanity's oldest and most destructive of illusions. Evil's not out there. It's the shadow of human consciousness itself. When it's projected out, it creates witch hunts, inquisitions, wars against evil. But when we start to collectively own this inwardly, it becomes a material of transformation for us. None of us are victims of demons. We are apprentices of wholeness. The darkness within us is the raw matter of individuation. It's not evidence of damnation. So the danger, basically, of people like this teaching these lies doesn't come from its zeal. It comes from its ignorance of psychology. It mistakes matter metaphors for fact, symbols for events. It's mistaking projection for revelation. When you fight your own unconscious as if it were Satan itself, it's to be completely divided in yourself. You get redemption not by expelling your demons, you get it by integrating with them. Even the darkness can serve your own inner light. Please remember that. And people like this, just get rid of them. Downvote, move on, because it's not worth the time of day. And I hope it doesn't hurt too many people out there. Anyway, thanks for watching. I had to make this video. And I may do more like this in the future. If things piss me off enough, I'll be here. Till next time.